Night drapes itself softly over the world, and the busy sounds of the day grow quiet until they are only memory. Lamps glow like small stars in familiar rooms. Pillows remember the shape of weary heads, and hearts look for a place to rest without hurry. In this gentle hour, a calm invitation opens like a door left ajar. Enter and be at peace. Here, within the hush, a space is prepared where worries set down their armor and hopes do not need to speak loudly to be heard. Breath finds a slower rhythm. Thoughts loosen their tight knots, and the body learns again how to lie still without asking permission from tomorrow. This is the tender threshold of sleep, where stories become lullabies and faith moves closer than the next heartbeat. Welcome to Whispers of Faith, a quiet harbor for souls that crave gentleness, a place where the ancient paths are walked slowly, hand in hand with trust. The words that follow will not rush. They will not startle. They will not demand. They will drift like a warm breeze across still water, guiding the mind toward peace and the spirit toward the nearness of God. Let the bed cradle every ounce of weight carried today. Shoulders soften. Jaw unhooks its stubborn hinge. Hands grow light as leaves in evening air. Draw in a long, unforced breath. Then let it go as if releasing a flock of small birds into open sky. Again. And again, until the chest remembers that it was made to rise and fall without fear. Beyond the window, the night keeps faithful watch. Stars hold their places. The moon keeps its patient course, and the quiet earth turns under a maker who neither sleeps nor forgets. The same care that balances oceans and lights galaxies tilts tenderly toward one resting figure here and now. Under that watchful love, no corner is unnoticed. No shadow is unaccompanied. A story waits at the edge of this stillness. It comes from a time when foreign cities gleamed with unfamiliar gold, when the language of streets carried the dust of exile, when a servant of God lived far from the hills of his childhood and yet closer than ever to the heart of his king. His name was Daniel. His days were spent in a court of power, his dawns and dusks in prayer that opened windows toward home. But do not hurry there yet. Let the mind walk instead through a gentle courtyard where fountains whisper in low voices. Hear water striking water in calm circles. See light playing along the surface like a child tracing patterns with a finger. Stone benches keep the cool memory of shade, and the air carries the faint sweetness of crushed herbs beneath careful feet. In this place, prayer is not effort. It is breath. Daniel will arrive soon, with steady habits carried like lanterns through unfamiliar corridors. Lions will one day pace in a ring of darkness and warm breath, and the sound of their paws will drum the floor like a muted storm. Yet even that night will bow to a greater presence. For before dens and decrees and seals of kings, there is always the quiet choice to trust. Trust takes shape here, in the resting hour. where hearts learn to lean into a love that holds when doors close and stones are rolled into place. Set down the day's questions like jars at the edge of a well. Some are full of things that cannot be fixed tonight. Some are empty and ask to be filled tomorrow. Leave them all beside the water and keep only the cup of this moment. Sip slowly from peace. Taste the certainty that nothing in the dark is stronger than the hand that keeps the stars where they belong. The city of Babylon lies far away and long ago. Yet the ache of being a stranger is near to any who have felt out of place within their own thoughts. Daniel's faith will speak softly to that ache. It will not scold fear, it will befriend it and walk it to the gate of God's care. It will show that trust is not loud or dramatic. It is a window opened at the same hour each day. A whisper shaped into a habit. A life turned toward heaven with steady angles. Let this truth settle like warm oil across the surface of the mind. God's protection is not a sudden thunder only. It is a daily shade that teaches skin to breathe beneath noon suns and midnight winds alike. When danger prowls, protection becomes a wall. When dread imagines teeth in the dark, protection becomes an unseen angel with gentle, commanding hands. When sleep feels fragile, protection becomes a song hummed so quietly that eyelids grow heavy simply from listening. Rest now in the knowledge that the one who wrote courage into the heart of a faithful exile writes the same courage into hearts that lie down in ordinary rooms. Courage for you does not need a den or a crown or a decree. It needs only this: a willingness to trust the Shepherd King who stands watch while you sleep. The story will unfold in tender steps. We will walk corridors where jealousy whispers behind carved doors. We will stand near windows that face a beloved horizon. We will feel rope and stone and hear the slow echo of an order carried out by reluctant hands. And in the deepest circle of night, we will find not terror but peace. Not teeth but silence. Not defeat but the breath of angels. For now, close the inner door and draw the soft curtain. Listen to the hush between the sounds of the room. The almost silence that proves you are safe. Let eyelids lower a little more with every line. Let the forehead smooth like calm water after a pebble's last ripple. If thoughts return with restless feet, greet them kindly and point them toward the simple prayer that opens every window: God is near. Again. And again. Until they accept the truth and curl up like satisfied cats in the warm corner of your mind. The night belongs to the one who guarded Daniel. This bed belongs to his kindness. This breath belongs to his peace. And this story belongs to a love that does not fail when laws are signed or when stones are rolled. Long before the lions stirred in their den. Long before kings signed decrees or courtiers whispered in jealousy. The story of Daniel began in exile. Jerusalem had fallen. The once crowded streets where children played and merchants called were left in silence. Stones that had echoed with prayer cracked under the boots of Babylon's armies. The temple, the pride of the people, the place of worship, stood plundered and broken. The chosen nation was carried away into a land of foreign gods, foreign speech, and foreign kings. Among those taken was a young man named Daniel. He was far from home, far from the hills and valleys where his ancestors had walked with God. Far from the temple courts where songs once rose like incense in the morning air. He found himself in Babylon, a city of towering walls and glittering palaces, its streets lined with idols of gold and stone. A place where the river reflected gardens hung in the sky, and yet the air carried the ache of captivity. But though the people of God were carried far, God himself was not absent. He does not remain behind when his children are taken into exile. His presence does not fade when the land of promise seems lost. He walks with them into the land of their sorrow, into the places of their trial. Daniel was chosen to serve in the court of the king. He was taught the language of Babylon, its customs, its wisdom. He walked corridors of polished stone, where voices of rulers echoed, where power weighed heavily in the air. Yet within his heart, Daniel carried something greater than Babylon's might. He carried trust in the living God. Even in exile, he did not forget. He remembered the songs of Zion, the words of the prophets, the covenant of his fathers. He remembered that though kings rise and fall, the Lord reigns forever. And so, far from home, he lived as though he was still in the temple courts, his life an offering, his heart a sanctuary. Exile is more than a place. It is the feeling of being far from where you long to be. Perhaps you too have known exile. Times when the familiar was stripped away, when you lived among things that felt foreign, when your soul ached for a home you could not see. Yet as with Daniel, God was near you there. His hand steady, his promise unbroken. Picture Daniel walking in the gardens of Babylon at dusk. The air heavy with fragrance of flowers not native to his homeland. The walls rising high above him, built by the hands of those who boasted in their power. The sound of water running through channels to feed the king's plants. And still, in Daniel's heart, a prayer. Whispered not to idols of stone, but to the living God of heaven. Daniel's exile did not end quickly. It stretched over years, over kings, over empires. Yet through all of it, his trust remained steady. And that trust would soon carry him into trials greater than he could imagine. But tonight, as you rest, let this part of Daniel's story remind you. Even in exile, even far from what is familiar, you are not abandoned. God goes with his children into every land, into every circumstance, into every shadow. The story will move forward. Jealousy will rise, laws will be twisted, lions will prowl. But first we remember this: exile is not the end. It is the place where trust begins to shine. Daniel lived far from the land of his fathers. Yet the rhythm of his days was not ruled by Babylon. From morning's first light until the shadows stretched long at evening, his heart remained tuned to God. He was known for wisdom, for clarity of thought when others were confused, for calmness when others panicked. But more than that, he was known for devotion. For though he stood in the courts of kings, he bowed in prayer to the King of heaven. 3 times each day, Daniel opened the windows of his chamber toward Jerusalem. He faced the city that once held the temple, the place where God's name had been set. His prayers rose like incense across the distance, weaving invisible threads between exile and home, between earth and heaven. Those who served alongside him noticed. They saw the steady integrity with which he worked. They could not accuse him of corruption, for he was honest. They could not accuse him of laziness, for he was diligent. They could not accuse him of pride, for he was humble. Daniel's life was marked not only by skill, but by faith. Faith that did not waver though years passed in a land not his own. Faith that held to prayer though voices mocked. Faith that trusted God even when the culture around him bowed to idols. Picture Daniel in the early morning. The city of Babylon still stirring awake, merchants lifting their shutters, soldiers marching at the gates. Yet in his chamber, Daniel kneels. The sounds of the city fade, the hum of life grows faint. His voice carries softly words of gratitude, words of petition, words of trust. His hands lift, his heart bows, his life rests in the hands of the God who never left him. Faith like this does not grow in an instant. It is cultivated in the daily choice to trust, in the small habits that anchor the soul. Daniel did not wait for crisis to teach him how to pray. He prayed long before crisis came. And when trial arrived, his heart already knew the way to God. This is the quiet strength of a faithful life. Not dramatic gestures, but steady rhythms. Not loud declarations, but consistent devotion. Not occasional moments of faith, but a pattern that weaves faith into every breath. Perhaps tonight your heart longs for such steadiness. Perhaps you feel your own prayers falter, your trust waver. Remember this: God honors small, steady habits. A whispered prayer in the quiet. A thought turned toward him amid the noise. A moment of trust when fear presses close. Each is a stone placed on the path of faith. And slowly, the path becomes strong, unshakable. Daniel's faithful life was noticed by men. But more importantly, it was honored by God. And soon, that faith would be tested in ways that seemed impossible. Yet because of his faithfulness in the quiet, he was ready for the trial in the open. Daniel's life whispers to every restless heart tonight. Trust need not be dramatic. It can be simple, steady, unbroken. The daily choice to turn toward God is itself a victory. And in that faithfulness, protection is near. Daniel's faithfulness did not remain hidden. Even in the great courts of Babylon, where many voices competed for attention and many hands sought favor, his life shone quietly. He was not loud, not ambitious in the way of others, yet his wisdom set him apart. Kings came and went. Their palaces rose in splendor and sometimes fell in ruin. Yet through it all, Daniel remained. He served faithfully, interpreting dreams when no one else could, offering counsel when the wisest men were silent. His clarity was not born of human skill alone. It was the gift of God, the fruit of a heart attuned to heaven. Because of this, Daniel rose to favor. He was entrusted with responsibility, promoted above others, honored in ways few exiles could imagine. He walked the polished halls not as one who sought power, but as one who carried peace. And kings, though they held thrones, leaned on the steady wisdom of a servant of God. Picture Daniel standing before the throne of King Darius. The court filled with advisors in rich garments, their voices eager, their words flowing like rivers that drown truth. And then Daniel speaks. His words calm, measured, humble. And yet they pierce through confusion. The king listens, his expression softens, and once again Daniel is lifted higher in trust. But with favor came danger. For jealousy is a shadow that follows closely behind blessing. The higher Daniel rose, the more eyes turned toward him in envy. His honesty, his faithfulness, his unwillingness to bend to corruption, these which made him trustworthy to the king made him a threat to those who desired power for themselves. Still, Daniel did not seek to protect his position. He sought only to honor God. His rise to favor was never his goal. It was the quiet consequence of a faithful life. For us too, this truth holds gentle weight. Faithfulness in small things, devotion in quiet corners, integrity in hidden places, these become the very foundation on which trust is built. Favor may come, honor may follow, but they are never the prize. The prize is God's presence. The reward is His nearness. Tonight, as you listen, imagine walking through a great palace of stone and gold. The floors gleam, the torches burn, voices echo along high walls. In the midst of such grandeur stands a man of prayer, steady as an oak, humble as a servant. That is Daniel. That is the one God raised up, not because he sought power, but because he sought God. Daniel's rise to favor sets the stage for what is to come. For envy will soon grow louder, schemes will take shape, and the man who stood with integrity will be tested with threats of death. Yet his story whispers this truth to us: those who rise in favor with God need not fear the schemes of men. For the hand that lifts them is stronger than the hands that plot against them. Daniel's rise to favor did not go unnoticed. His wisdom, his faithfulness, his steady devotion to God, these became lights in the courts of Babylon. But lights, though they guide the humble, also draw the envy of those who walk in shadows. And so jealousy stirred among the officials who served alongside him. They watched as the king trusted Daniel, watched as his voice carried weight in council, watched as his honesty shone where their deceit lurked. And their hearts, restless for power, grew bitter. They whispered in corners, their words heavy with envy. They frowned at the sight of his quiet influence. They hardened their plans in secret. Jealousy is an ancient shadow. It springs up when blessing falls upon another. It festers when a life of faithfulness exposes the emptiness of ambition. It cannot rest while another prospers. So it was with these men. They could not accuse Daniel of corruption, for he was blameless. They could not accuse him of laziness, for he was diligent. They could not accuse him of dishonor, for his life was marked by integrity. So they searched for a weakness. And they found only one. His devotion to God. 3 times a day, Daniel prayed. Morning, noon, and evening, his windows open toward Jerusalem, his voice rising to heaven. It was his habit, his anchor, his offering. It was the one place where he would not bend, not compromise, not waver. And in that devotion, his enemies saw both his strength and, in their eyes, his vulnerability. Picture the officials standing in hushed groups, their faces bent close, their eyes darting. Their whispers filled with venom, their envy burning. We cannot trap him in matters of the kingdom. He is too honest, too faithful, too trustworthy. But we can trap him in the law of his God. And so the seed of their plot was sown. For jealousy does not rest until it seeks to destroy. It cannot abide the sight of another's honor. It feeds on schemes, grows strong on lies, and bends even justice to its will. Yet here, even in the stirring of envy, we find a quiet reminder. The faithful life is not always met with applause. Integrity does not always bring ease. Those who walk with God will sometimes find that others, seeing the light, resent it. But the shepherd who guards his flock does not abandon them to the shadows of jealousy. His hand is steady, his watch unbroken. Think of Daniel in these days. He does not change his habits. He does not hide his prayers. He does not fear the whispers of men. For he knows that the gaze of God is stronger than the gaze of schemers. He knows that the approval of heaven is worth more than the favor of kings or courtiers. Perhaps tonight you too have felt the sting of jealousy from others. Perhaps you have walked in honesty and found that others, rather than celebrate, grew resentful. Take comfort in Daniel's story. You are not alone. The shepherd sees. The shepherd knows. And his presence is stronger than the envy of many. Let yourself breathe slowly into this truth. Inhale, God sees. Exhale, God protects. With every breath, let the tension of comparison and envy fall away. You are not defined by what others whisper. You are held by the love of the shepherd, steady and sure. The jealous officials believed they were clever. They thought their plot would corner Daniel, silence his faith, remove him from favor. But what they did not know was this: no law, no decree, no scheme can silence the hand of God. So the stage is set. The officials' jealousy hardens into conspiracy. They begin to weave their net of deceit. And soon they will bring their plan to the king himself. But tonight, as you rest, let this reminder hold you. Jealousy may stir, envy may whisper, but the shepherd's care is not shaken. The same God who guarded Daniel's heart in exile will guard your heart in the night. His peace is stronger than plots, his love greater than envy, his presence unbreakable even in the face of scheming men. Jealousy, once kindled, does not fade. It grows, it seeks, it plots. The officials who envied Daniel's favor in the king's court were restless until they could find a way to destroy him. They had examined his work and found no fault. They had searched his life and discovered no corruption. They had watched his dealings and seen only honesty. The only path left was the one they believed could never fail: his devotion to God. So they conspired together, voices weaving in low tones, eyes narrowed with cunning. They crafted a scheme as delicate as a spider's web and as dangerous as a hunter's snare. "If we are to trap him," they whispered, "it must be in the law of his God." And so the plan was born. They would go to the king, not with accusations, but with flattery. For they knew King Darius valued loyalty, and they knew pride can be coaxed into signing what wisdom would never allow. Picture the court one afternoon. The air warm with the scent of burning oils, the marble floors polished until they mirrored the torches on the walls. The officials, dressed in fine robes, bow low before the throne. Their words flow like honey. "O King Darius, live forever. You are mighty above all. Your word is law, your decree unshakable. Who among men is like you?" The king listens. His heart softens under their praise. And then comes their request. "Issue a decree, O king, that for 30 days, no one shall pray to any god or man except you. Let all who would pray bring their requests to you alone. And if any refuse, let them be cast into the den of lions." Their words are framed as loyalty. Their faces wear masks of devotion. But behind them lies jealousy sharp as a blade. They care nothing for the king's honor. They care only for Daniel's fall. The king, hearing their flattery, does not pause long enough to see their trap. The decree is written, sealed with the royal signet, and made law. A law of the Medes and Persians. A law that cannot be revoked. And so the snare is set. The officials smile in secret satisfaction. For they know Daniel's habit. They know his faith. They know he will not bend, not even for a law signed by the king himself. This is the way of envy. It disguises itself as loyalty. It cloaks itself in noble words. It pretends to honor while it seeks to destroy. But beneath its surface lies emptiness. For jealousy builds nothing. It only seeks to tear down what others have built. Think of Daniel as the decree is announced. The law spreads through the city, whispered in marketplaces, spoken in homes. No prayer, except to the king. No petition, except to Darius. And in his chamber, Daniel hears. He knows the trap has been laid. He knows the penalty is death. And yet his heart does not tremble. For his trust is not in laws, not in rulers, not in men. His trust is in God. Tonight, as you rest, consider this truth. Faith will sometimes be tested not in open battle, but in subtle traps. In quiet laws, in whispered schemes, in pressures that demand you bow when your soul knows it must stand. Yet in those moments, the shepherd is near. His rod and staff comfort, his presence sustains. Let yourself breathe into this assurance. Inhale, God is faithful. Exhale, I will trust Him. With each breath, feel courage settle deeper, quiet but unshakable. The same God who watched Daniel hears your prayers tonight. He is not bound by decrees. He is not hindered by schemes. He is the same in palaces and in prisons, in courts and in dens. The decree is written. The law sealed. The trap set. The officials whisper with satisfaction, believing their work is done. But what they do not yet know is that no snare is stronger than the shepherd's protection. And no law is greater than his love. The decree was signed. The law was sealed. The words had spread through Babylon like fire carried on dry wind. For 30 days, no one may pray to any god or man except to King Darius. Whoever disobeys shall be cast into the den of lions. The officials smiled behind closed doors. They imagined Daniel trembling. They pictured him silenced, his windows shuttered, his prayers swallowed in fear. Yet when the decree reached Daniel's ears, his heart did not change. His habits did not falter. His devotion did not bend. 3 times a day, as he had always done, Daniel went to his chamber. He opened the windows toward Jerusalem. He knelt, his face lifted toward the city of his fathers, toward the temple once filled with God's glory. And he prayed. There was no protest, no loud declaration, no attempt to fight the law with his own hands. Only faith. Quiet, steady, unshaken. Picture the room. Light pours through the window, casting long beams across the floor. A mat woven of simple threads lies beneath him. His hands lift, his lips move, his heart pours itself out before God. The city hums beyond the walls. And still he prays. Not once, not twice, but 3 times each day. Daniel's faith was not reaction to the decree. It was continuation of what he had always done. For trusting God is not built in the crisis. It is revealed by it. His life had been a long preparation for this moment. And when it came, his soul did not hesitate. The officials, lurking in the shadows, waited. They knew where he would be. They knew what he would do. They gathered below his window, ears straining, eyes narrowed. And there they saw what they expected. Daniel praying. Daniel unshaken. Daniel faithful. How strange it must have seemed to them. To risk death for prayer. To choose lions rather than silence. Yet Daniel knew what they could not understand. Better to fall into the hands of lions than to turn away from the God who is faithful forever. For us, Daniel's unshaken faith whispers a lesson. Faith does not mean life will be easy. It means choosing trust even when the cost is great. It means opening the windows of prayer when fear demands them closed. It means bending knees to God when the world demands them bent to men. Perhaps you too have faced moments where trust cost you something. a friendship, a comfort, a reputation. Perhaps you know what it feels like to stand steady when others would prefer you silent. Daniel's story tells you this: the shepherd is near. He sees, he honors, he protects. Let yourself rest in that truth tonight. Inhale, I will trust. Exhale, God is near. With each breath, imagine the windows of your soul opening wide, facing heaven, unafraid. Trust is not loud. It is steady. Not dramatic, but faithful. The officials hurried from the scene, their satisfaction deepened. They had the proof they wanted. They would bring it before the king. They would press their accusation. And they believed their victory was near. But heaven also watched from that window. The God to whom Daniel prayed heard every word, saw every kneeling moment, received every whispered petition. And already his plan for deliverance was written. The trap was sprung. Daniel was accused. Yet his faith stood firm. And soon, the den of lions would test not his devotion, but God's protection. The decree was set. Daniel's prayers continued. And the jealous officials, eager for their scheme to bear fruit, became spies in the shadows. They watched him with eyes sharp as blades, waited in silence like hunters crouched in tall grass. And when they saw him kneel, they believed their moment had come. 3 times a day, Daniel prayed. It was no secret. He did not hide, though he could have shuttered his windows and whispered in secret corners. Instead, his faith remained open, steady, visible. Not to provoke, but because devotion to God was never meant to be hidden. And so the spies gathered beneath his chamber, listening for the sound of his voice. Picture them there. A cluster of men in fine robes, their faces hardened with envy, their whispers dripping with satisfaction. They lean close to one another, nodding when they hear the murmur of prayer through the open windows. They point to the figure kneeling in stillness. There, they whisper. There is our proof. Their hearts leap not with joy, but with triumph at another's fall. When Daniel rose from his prayer, they scurried away like jackals with stolen prey. They hurried through the palace halls, their footsteps quick, their voices eager. O King Darius, did you not sign a decree? Did you not declare that for 30 days no one may pray to any god or man except you, O King? And did you not declare that whoever disobeys shall be thrown into the den of lions? The king, proud of his law, answered, The decree stands. It is a law of the Medes and Persians. It cannot be revoked. And then came their strike. Daniel, one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king. He still prays 3 times a day. Their words dripped with accusation, not spoken in concern, but in glee. Not spoken for justice, but for destruction. They could not bear Daniel's integrity, and so they clothed their envy in the language of law. The king's heart sank, for he valued Daniel. He trusted him. He had seen his wisdom, his honesty, his faithfulness. And now he realized what had been done. The trap was not for loyalty to the throne. It was for Daniel. The spies stood proudly, certain of their triumph. They had the law, they had the proof, they had the king bound in his own decree. They thought the matter finished. Yet what they did not know was that they had also bound themselves in the gaze of heaven. For the God whom Daniel served neither sleeps nor turns his face away. Jealousy often spies in shadows. It hides behind masks of righteousness. It pretends to seek justice, while its true hunger is to wound. But shadows are never stronger than light. And the God who watched Daniel pray also watched the officials plot. He saw their whispers, their envy, their deceit. And his plan for deliverance was already unfolding. Tonight, as you lie still, perhaps you too feel the weight of eyes watching, the sting of others' envy, the ache of being misunderstood. Take comfort in Daniel's story. You are not unseen. God's gaze is upon you. His light reaches into every shadow, His truth unmasks every scheme, His love defends every heart that trusts in Him. Breathe deeply into this assurance. Inhale, God sees. Exhale, I am safe. With each breath, imagine His presence surrounding you like a shield of light. Shadows may gather, but they cannot pierce the protection of His care. The spies had their evidence. They hurried to the king. They pressed their case with eager voices. But what they saw as victory would soon become the stage for God's greater glory. For no shadow, no scheme, no den of lions is greater than the shepherd's hand. The officials came before King Darius with their accusation. Their voices eager, their words sharpened like arrows. Daniel, one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king. He continues to pray 3 times a day. The king listened. And as the words fell into the air, his heart grew heavy. For he loved Daniel. He had trusted him more than the other advisors. He had leaned on his wisdom, admired his integrity, relied upon his faithfulness. And in that moment, Darius understood the truth. He had been deceived. The decree he had signed in pride was not a tribute to his greatness, but a trap laid for Daniel. The regret pressed like a weight upon his shoulders. He had been flattered, tricked, bound by his own word. And now the law of the Medes and Persians, the law that could not be revoked, demanded Daniel's life. Picture the king in his chamber, pacing across floors of polished stone. The torches flicker in the evening air, casting long shadows against the walls. Servants wait in silence, fearful of his restless mood. His crown feels heavy, his throne no longer a comfort. For what is the power of a king, when it cannot save the one he values most? All day, the king searched for a way to rescue Daniel. He called advisors, examined the law, sought for a loophole, a hidden path. But the officials stood firm, their eyes watchful, their words unyielding. Remember, O king, it is the law of the Medes and Persians. It cannot be changed. Their insistence only deepened his grief. He saw their jealousy for what it was. He recognized their malice. But even a king, strong in might, was trapped by the law he had signed. And so regret became his companion. Heavy as iron, sharp as sorrow. He had meant to honor himself, but he had dishonored his most faithful servant. He had meant to strengthen his throne, but he had weakened his heart. This is the nature of regret. It comes swiftly after pride has spoken. It lingers when choices cannot be undone. And yet even here, God was at work. For what men bound in law, he would unbind with his hand. What seemed hopeless to a king was already prepared for deliverance by the King of Kings. Tonight, as you rest, perhaps you too know the weight of regret. Choices made in haste, words spoken in pride, paths taken that cannot be walked back. Yet hear this truth: God's mercy weaves even regret into redemption. He is not hindered by mistakes. He is not silenced by failures. He is the shepherd who restores, who brings light out of shadow, hope out of despair. Let yourself breathe slowly. Inhale, God redeems. Exhale, even my regret. With every breath, release the weight you have carried too long. Trust that the same God who guarded Daniel is able to guard you, even through choices you wish you could change. The king could not sleep that night. His food was set aside, his music silenced, his rest stolen by the thought of lions' jaws and Daniel's faithful prayers. Regret haunted him, but love stirred in his heart. He could only wait for the dawn. The officials believed they had won. The law was sealed, the king bound, Daniel accused. Yet in the silence of the night, heaven prepared its answer. For what is sealed by men is never beyond the hand of God. The sun lowered itself behind the high walls of Babylon, painting the sky in gold and crimson. And with it came the hour of decision. The officials, eager to see their plot fulfilled, pressed again into the king's presence. Remember, O king, the decree you signed. No prayer to any god or man but you. Whoever disobeys must be thrown into the den of lions. Their voices were sharp, insistent. They would not allow the matter to rest. For in their hearts, envy demanded conclusion. They longed not only to see Daniel accused, but to see him destroyed. The king's face was heavy with sorrow. He had sought all day for a way of escape. He had searched the law, questioned his scribes, turned over possibilities in his mind. But every path ended in the same stone wall. The decree could not be revoked. The law could not be undone. His hands were bound by his own pride. And so, as twilight deepened, he gave the order. Daniel was to be brought forth. The guards, solemn and slow, entered his chamber. Their footsteps echoed like drumbeats of fate across the marble floors. Daniel, calm as the morning, walked between them. No struggle in his step, no fear in his eyes. Only quiet trust. Picture the procession. The streets lined with whispers, the palace corridors filled with hushed voices. Torches flickered against the carved lions that adorned the gates. The officials followed at a distance, their faces cloaked in triumph. And at the center walked Daniel, steady, unwavering. The king, unable to bear the weight of his own words, spoke to Daniel before the guards led him away. His voice trembled with sorrow, yet also with a thread of hope. May your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you. The sentence was declared. The stone path led toward the den where lions prowled in restless circles. The heavy air carried their growls, low and deep, a sound that made even soldiers shiver. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretched longer, and the order of man prepared to test the faith of God's servant. And yet, Daniel did not resist. His heart was steady. For he knew that kings may sign decrees, officials may plot schemes, lions may prowl in dens. But the hand of God remains above them all. This is the truth that cradles us tonight. Decrees may be signed against us, voices may rise in accusation, trials may loom near. Yet none of these are stronger than the shepherd who watches. None of them can silence his care, none of them can undo his protection. Perhaps you too have heard sentences declared over your life. Words of defeat, of fear, of hopelessness. Perhaps others have spoken against you, or circumstances have seemed to seal your fate. Hear the whisper of Daniel's story. No sentence of men is greater than the promise of God. Let yourself breathe deeply into this truth. Inhale, God delivers. Exhale, I will trust Him. With each breath, let fear loosen its grip. Let peace settle like a cloak around your shoulders. You are not at the mercy of schemes, but in the hands of the one who commands the mouths of lions. The sentence was declared. Daniel was led toward the den. The stone waited to be rolled across the opening. The officials waited in triumph. The king waited in sorrow. And heaven waited to show its power. The sentence was spoken. The guards carried it out with solemn steps. The officials followed with satisfaction heavy in their eyes. And Daniel was led to the place no man longed to see. The den of lions. The den lay beyond the palace walls, carved into the earth. Its entrance was wide, but dark. A hollow mouth waiting to swallow those condemned by the law. From within came the sounds of beasts, low growls that rumbled like distant thunder, the scrape of claws against stone, the restless pacing of creatures that knew hunger. Torches flickered at the edge, casting light that only deepened the shadows within. The smell of earth mingled with the musk of lions, sharp and heavy in the night air. Daniel stood at its edge. He was no longer young, his years many, his hair touched with grey. But his heart was steady. His face calm. He did not tremble, though the soldiers beside him shifted uneasily. He had trusted God in exile. He had trusted God in palaces. He would trust God here. The king himself came to the place. his heart torn between law and love. He spoke to Daniel, his voice strained with sorrow. "Your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver you." It was both a plea and a prayer. The words of a man who regretted his choices, who hoped against hope that Daniel's God would prove greater than lions, greater than laws. And then the moment came. The guards lowered Daniel into the darkness. The ropes tightened around his body as he was lowered down, the sound of stone walls echoing around him. The lions stirred, their golden eyes catching torchlight, their muscles rippling with power. A growl rolled through the chamber, deep and long, a sound that made the heart of every man above quake. The stone was rolled across the entrance. Heavy hands pushed it into place, and the king's seal was pressed upon it, joined with the seals of the officials. The decree was complete. To all who watched, it seemed certain. Daniel would not see the dawn. But within the den, something greater stirred. Daniel stood in the darkness. The lions circled, their breath hot in the cool air. Their eyes glowed, their tails lashed. Yet as they drew close, an unseen presence filled the place. An angel of the Lord, radiant though unseen by mortal eyes, stood between the servant and the beasts. A quiet authority, stronger than stone, stronger than claw, stronger than hunger. The lions paused. Their growls softened. They blinked, confused. One lowered itself to the ground, resting its head upon its paws. Another circled twice and lay beside the wall. Their restlessness stilled, their hunger silenced, their strength subdued. For the God who shuts the mouths of beasts had spoken in silence, and creation obeyed. Daniel breathed slowly, his heart at peace. He lowered himself to the floor of the den, the earth cool beneath him. Around him lay lions, mighty and fierce, yet quiet as lambs in the shepherd's fold. Their breathing slowed, their eyes dimmed with sleep. The den became not a place of terror, but of peace. The night stretched long. Above, the king paced in his palace, unable to eat, unable to sleep, waiting for dawn. But within the den, Daniel rested. For the one who neither slumbers nor sleeps watched over him. Picture the scene as the hours passed. The moon rose high, its silver light faint against the stone. The wind whispered through cracks above. The lions shifted now and then, their tails brushing the ground, their bodies heavy with slumber. And Daniel prayed. He whispered thanks to the God who had carried him from Jerusalem to Babylon, from exile to honor, from trial to this den, and who even now carried him still. The den, meant for death, became a sanctuary. The lions, meant for destruction, became silent companions. The night, meant for fear, became a testimony. This is the mystery of trust. It does not remove the den. It transforms it. It does not silence the decree. It silences the lions. It does not prevent the trial. It preserves the soul through it. Perhaps tonight you feel surrounded by lions of your own. fears that pace at the edge of your thoughts, worries that growl in the silence, burdens that loom like shadows in the dark. Daniel's night reminds you, the shepherd is stronger than your lions. His presence is nearer than their teeth. His hand is steady, his angels near. And even in the den, you are safe. Let your breathing slow as you rest in this truth. Inhale, God is with me. Exhale, I will not fear. With each breath, imagine the lions of your worry lying down, their mouths closed, their restlessness stilled. See them subdued by the presence of the God who rules both beasts and kings. Hours passed. Silence deepened. And Daniel, surrounded by lions, found peace greater than the roar of beasts, greater than the schemes of men, greater than the fear of death. The night of lions was not the end. It was the beginning of testimony. For when the morning came, the king would hurry to the den. And the story of God's protection would shine brighter than the gold of Babylon, brighter than the crowns of kings. The stone was rolled across the mouth of the den. The seal was pressed by the king's own hand. The torches flickered against the night air, then dimmed as the crowd dispersed. And the city of Babylon settled into its evening hush. But the heart of King Darius found no rest. He returned to his palace, but the walls that had once felt strong and secure now closed in like a prison. The throne that once seemed a place of pride now felt heavy with shame. The crown upon his head seemed more like a burden than an honor. For though he commanded armies, though his word shaped laws, though his voice carried authority across nations, he could not undo what he had done. Servants entered with trays of food, delicacies meant to soothe a weary ruler. He waved them away. The choicest fruits, the richest meats, the sweetest wines held no taste. For how could he feast while Daniel lay in the darkness among lions? Musicians came, harps and flutes ready, prepared to fill the halls with gentle songs that lulled kings into peace. He dismissed them with a gesture. For how could music soothe a heart filled with regret? The great bed stood ready, its cushions soft, its coverings rich, its space wide. Yet when he lay upon it, rest fled from him. He turned this way and that, the sheets twisted beneath him. The sound of his own breathing seemed loud in the silence. The shadows in the corners seemed heavy with accusation. Picture the king pacing the floor, his royal sandals clicking against marble tiles, his hands clasped behind his back, his head bowed. He paused at windows, staring into the night, as if the stars themselves might answer his anguish. But the heavens were silent, save for the distant echo of lions' growls that seemed to rise from the earth itself. What is power when it cannot protect the one you value? What is authority when it binds you to regret? What is kingship when envy and deceit have twisted your judgment? Darius longed for morning, yet dreaded what it might bring. Would the dawn reveal only silence in the den? Would it uncover the remains of one who had been more faithful than all his officials? The thought weighed upon him like stone upon his chest. Perhaps he prayed, though not with the steady devotion of Daniel. Perhaps his lips formed words to a God he barely knew. O God of Daniel, if you are there, if you are living, spare him, deliver him, prove yourself stronger than my failure. This is the mystery of sleepless nights. They strip away illusions of power. They expose the futility of pride. They reveal how fragile even kings are. And yet they can become the place where the soul reaches for what is higher than itself. Tonight, as you listen, perhaps you know the weight of a sleepless night. Perhaps regret keeps you pacing. Perhaps fear curls itself at the edge of your bed like a restless shadow. Remember this: you are not alone. The God who watched over Daniel also watches over you. The shepherd neither slumbers nor sleeps. He keeps guard when you cannot. Breathe slowly into this truth. Inhale, God watches. Exhale, I can rest. With every breath, let the tightness in your chest ease. Let the restless thoughts quiet. Let the night itself become a sanctuary. Above the sealed den, the king paced in sorrow. Within the den, Daniel rested in peace. The contrast is striking. A ruler with all the power of empire, yet no rest. A servant condemned to lions, yet calm as still water. Such is the difference trust makes. The night stretched long. Hour after hour, the king's eyes remained open, heavy with regret. His servants withdrew, the palace fell silent, and he walked alone in vast halls that seemed empty despite their grandeur. Every sound reminded him of what he had done. Every silence echoed with the question of what dawn would bring. And yet, unseen, God was writing the story. The king's sleepless night would become the backdrop for testimony. For when morning came, and when the stone was rolled aside, the truth would shine. That no king, no law, no den of lions is greater than the hand of the living God. Night pressed heavy over Babylon. The king wandered sleepless in his palace. The officials rested smugly in their chambers, satisfied with the trap they had set. But in the den, sealed with stone and marked with the king's seal, a different story unfolded. A story unseen by human eyes, yet more real than the schemes of men or the fears of kings. Daniel sat upon the cool earth. His body lowered gently, his hands folded in quiet trust. Around him, lions paced. Their golden eyes gleamed in the faint shafts of moonlight slipping through cracks above. Their breath was hot, their muscles taut, their growls deep and resonant, rolling through the chamber like thunder before a storm. One lion circled closer. Its head lowered, its eyes fixed. The sound of its claws scraping stone echoed in the darkness. Its breath grew louder. A tremor of hunger rippled through its body. Yet before it reached Daniel, a presence stood between. Unseen by mortal eyes, but radiant in the realm of spirit. The angel of the Lord had come. The creature halted. Its growl choked into silence. Its eyes blinked in confusion. and then it stepped back, lowering itself to the ground. Another lion padded forward, tail lashing. But again the unseen barrier held. An authority greater than instinct, greater than hunger, greater than nature itself. Slowly, one by one, the lions grew still. Their growls faded. Their restless pacing quieted. They lay upon the ground like great stones, their sides rising and falling in sleep. The air, once tense with threat, grew calm. The den, once filled with menace, became a place of peace. Daniel lifted his face toward heaven. His lips formed words of gratitude. Not loud, not demanding, but soft, steady, thankful. He had trusted, and God had answered. Not with escape, not with prevention, but with presence. He was not removed from the den. He was protected within it. Picture the angel standing there. Luminous, steadfast, wings folded in majesty unseen by human eye. A sword not needed, for authority itself was weapon enough. The lions bowed not to man, but to the command of their Maker, carried in the silence of his messenger. Daniel leaned back against the stone wall. The earth cool beneath him. The air heavy with the scent of lions subdued. Yet his heart was calm, his breathing steady. Around him lay beasts whose power could have torn him apart. Yet they slept like lambs at his feet. For the God who shut the sea behind doors, who commands the winds and stars, had also shut the mouths of lions. The night passed slowly. Above, the moon moved across the sky. The torches in the palace burned low. The king turned in restless pacing. But Daniel rested. Guarded by an angel, sheltered by a presence stronger than stone and seal. This is the power of God's protection. It does not always remove the trial. Sometimes it places peace within it. It does not always prevent the den. Sometimes it makes the den a sanctuary. It does not always silence the decree. Sometimes it silences the lions instead. Perhaps tonight you feel surrounded by lions of your own. Fears that circle your thoughts. Burdens that press against your chest. Voices that roar louder in the silence of night. Remember this, the same God who sent his angel to Daniel watches over you. His presence is nearer than your fear. His authority stronger than your enemy. His peace deeper than your dread. Let yourself breathe slowly. Inhale, God sends his angels. Exhale, I am not alone. With each breath, feel the weight of worry lift, replaced by the certainty of protection. You are guarded, even when you cannot see. You are safe, even when shadows loom. The lions lay silent. The angel stood watch. And Daniel, faithful servant of God, passed the night not in terror, but in peace. When dawn would break, the stone would be moved. And the king would learn what the officials could not imagine. That an angel had walked into the den and had left it a sanctuary of peace. Night deepened until it felt like velvet laid over stone. And the den, meant to terrify, softened into a hush that surprised even the shadows. Above, the city settled into its own sleep. Gates secured, torches reduced to embers. The hush of Babylon rolling like a slow tide along streets of dust and carved brick. Below, where fear thought it ruled, a different kingdom held its ground. Daniel sat near the curve of the wall, the earth cool against his palms. Around him, the great bodies of lions rose and fell in long, even breaths. A living rhythm like waves upon a midnight shore. Their paws, massive, furred, sure, rested upon the stone with a quiet dignity. The long tails that had lashed the dust now traced unhurried arcs, drawing invisible circles of calm through the heavy air. The musk of their coats still lingered, warm and wild, and yet it no longer carried threat. It was simply the honest scent of creatures at rest under an honest hand. There is a peace that is the absence of danger. And there is a peace that stands within danger and remains unbroken. What held the den was the second kind. Not the silence of emptiness, but the stillness of presence. The angel who had stood between Daniel and the first rush of hunger remained, unseen by mortal eyes, steady as a mountain beneath the sea. Authority filled the dark the way fragrance fills a room. It did not argue with nature, it serenaded it back to the song it had forgotten. One lion shifted closer until the warmth of its flank was near enough to touch. The creature's ear flicked once at a dream only beasts can follow. Then stilled again. Another rolled its shoulder as if to test the floor for softness. Finding in the cool a comfort it had not expected. Teeth that could splinter bone hid behind lips folded like velvet, and jaws made for rending settled into the humility of sleep. The floor that had welcomed blood on other nights now held only breath, and that breath spoke peace. Daniel let his eyes close for a moment. He remembered hills of Judah where sheep had once grazed under the care of boys not unlike himself when he had been young. He remembered psalms sung at evening when the temple lamps still burned. He remembered windows open toward a city he loved, and a God he loved more still. Exile had not removed those memories, it had gilded them with the patience of longing. Now, in the strange sanctuary of a lion's den, those same memories arrived like friends who knew the way in the dark. Words formed without force. Not speeches. Not defenses. Only prayers that knew their path by heart. Gratitude first, because gratitude always finds the door. Then trust, because trust keeps it open. Then quiet, because love needs little sound when nearness has been proven. You have been my dwelling in all generations. From the morning of youth to the evening of these years, you have kept me. You are here now. You will be here when the dawn remembers its color. The angel's nearness did not blaze, it breathed. A holy hush, soft as a hand placed on a frantic heart. Nothing in the den denied what lions were made to be. Strength remained strength. Weight remained weight. Claw remained claw. But everything bowed to a higher note, and the creatures slept penned by a circumference only heaven can draw. peace among beasts. It began to weave itself into Daniel's sinews, into the ache of muscles that had known a hard descent, into the small places where a man carries his day without noticing. Each breath cleared more of the silt the hours had stirred. Each exhale released what the mind could not use. Fear, which had waited at a distance like a wolf beyond the firelight, finally settled down and closed its eyes. There are rooms in the soul that only such nights unlock. Rooms where a person learns that protection is not always the removal of danger but the mastery of it. Rooms where one discovers that God does not rescue in order to prove the faithful worthy. He rescues because love cannot do otherwise. In that room, Daniel rested. Not as one who demanded a miracle, but as one who recognized a friend. The lion's whiskers twitched in their sleep as if chasing the memory of chase. A paw flexed once, showing the pale underside where softness hides even in power. One great head lifted for a breath, nostrils drinking the air, eyes half-mooned with drowsy amber. It listened, not for prey, but for a music older than appetite. Finding it, the head lowered again.
Looked inside.
Beyond the stone, the palace summarized the world. Regret in a king who could not keep sleep, satisfaction in men who thought their scheme complete. But the world was larger than the palace. It always is. The circumference of God's guarding attention outstripped the ring of seals waxed onto the stone. What the law bound, love surrounded. What the decree threatened, mercy domesticated. Minutes and hours lost their names. The night became one long prayer stitched with the thread of breathing. When wakefulness came, it found Daniel gentle to it. When drowsiness came, it found him unafraid. He leaned his shoulder to the wall, then to the slow-rising flank of a lion, stone sharing its cool and creature sharing its warmth. It is a strange thing to be held by what you feared. Stranger still to learn that fear can be instructed by peace. The angel stood, bright to eyes that were not there to see. A sentinel whose sword did not need unsheathing, because command was enough. If anyone had descended with torches, they would have seen only a man at rest among beasts. But heaven knew better than to measure deliverance by torches. It measured by the faith that did not change when windows were threatened, by the prayer that did not miss its hour when laws missed their justice. Sometimes the mind asks how. How do mouths close? How do instincts pause? How does the law of hunger bow to the law of holiness? The night did not answer with explanations, it answered with a person. Peace was not an argument, peace was a presence. And when presence fills a space, questions sit respectfully along the wall and wait for morning. Daniel's heart rehearsed promises older than empires. You shut the sea behind doors. You leash the Pleiades and call Orion by name. You give the lion its prey and tell the ravens where to find their portion. You know my sitting, my rising, the words before they find my tongue. If I make my bed in the depths, still you are there. In such recitations, the soul remembers that the maker of lions does not argue with them. He speaks and they remember who they are in his story. A small draught threaded the cracks above. It carried with it the faintest rumor of dawn, a chill that belongs to hours just before first light, when the sky decides it is tired of black and begins to think about blue. The lions noticed and shifted, not to hunt but to nestle. One lay so near that the rhythm of its breath set a cadence for Daniel's own. Inhale. Exhale. Mercy in. Fear out. The simple sacrament of being kept. If anyone had asked the stones what they felt, they might have said that weight is faithful. Stones bear what they are given. That night they bore a secret they would be asked to release with the first brightness. But secrets are safe in the hands of God. No thief hears their footsteps. Peace among beasts teaches another lesson too. It tells the heart that reconciliation is the end God prefers. That even a den can become a school where creation is reminded of Eden's vocabulary. That sharp things can rest, and loud things can lower their volume, and strong things can learn the joy of gentleness. Not because nature has forgotten itself, but because nature remembers its maker. Daniel's hands, empty of tool or weapon, were full of the oldest work a human can do, resting in God. It is not laziness. It is agreement. It says, I consent to be kept. I yield my keeping to the one who keeps moons on their leashes and men within their calling. It says, I am content to let love be larger than my plans. Time moved. If it was counted, heaven alone did the counting. The angel did not grow bored. Angels do not grow bored while guarding those who trust. A shadow that might have been a rat considered the edge and thought better of it. The wind that thought about rising decided to wait until morning. Everything in the den took its place within a law that did not require legislation, the law of the Lord's nearness. This calm is not an experience one earns. It arrives as gift. But gifts can be welcomed, and Daniel welcomed it the way soil welcomes rain. Not grabbing, not hoarding, only opening. The thirsty ground became saturated earth, and the roots of his being drank what they had been made to drink since the first prayer learned his mouth. At some point, was it the middle watch, or the last? Daniel rested fully. Sleep visited, not like an ambush, but like a friend who knows how to move in quiet. The angel remained standing. The lions remained sleeping. The den held its breath the way chapels do when candles burn low and the last worshipper lingers. Above, a king stared through a window that gave him no answers. He did not know that below his own seal, a better seal had been set. Faithfulness had stamped the dark with its emblem, and even beasts understood it. If grief had hands, it could not lift the stone. If envy had teeth, it could not chew through mercy. When Daniel woke again, minutes or hours after, there was that small bright change that tells even closed-eyed creatures the night is considering release. The cold had thinned. Somewhere far away a bird rehearsed a single note, unsure whether to trust it. One of the lions yawned, not in hunger but in the simple stretch of life about to begin again. The angel inclined, if such beings can incline, toward the opening, as if listening for a footstep Daniel had not yet earned the right to expect. He placed his palm upon the nearest manere, not bold, not foolish, only grateful. The creature did not stir. Gratitude is a language beasts somehow understand when spoken under the grammar of God's peace. He whispered, words so soft that even stones blush to repeat them, thanks that do not need adjectives. Peace among beasts, peace within the man, peace under an angel's watch. The night had been given back to its maker. And in return, the maker prepared the dawn. Soon there will be voices at the edge of the stone. A king's voice first, breaking with hope he scarcely dares to name. Seals will be checked, ropes found, orders given, muscles put to holy use. But for this last unbroken moment, let the den remain what God has made it, a sanctuary carved by fear and redeemed by love. Let the breath of lions continue to mark the measures of a hymn older than Babylon. Let the servant of God sit in the middle of what once menaced him and be unafraid. For this is the lesson the night wrote in careful letters across the dark. When heaven stands present, even teeth remember how to keep their peace. And the heart remembers how to sleep. Dawn stirred slowly over Babylon. First came the pale lifting of the horizon, a thin seam of silver stitched between earth and sky. Then the cool breath of morning pushed against the city's stones, sliding through alleys and across market stalls not yet opened. Birds, hesitant at first, released tentative notes that gathered courage as light climbed higher. The city woke as it always did, unaware that beneath its feet a night of miracles had unfolded. But in the palace of King Darius, dawn came not as relief, but as urgency. For he had not slept. His eyes were heavy with shadows deeper than night itself, his mind pacing even when his body sat still. He had turned aside food, rejected music, refused the comfort of sleep. He had spent the long hours alone with his regret. And now, as the first colors touched the sky, his heart rushed ahead of his steps. The king rose quickly from his chamber, gathering only his robe about him. Servants stumbled awake at the sudden stir. Torches flared again as the palace came alive with movement. Guards fell into step, but the king outpaced them, his urgency too fierce for ceremony. Down the corridors he strode, past pillars carved with the victories of former kings, through courtyards still heavy with the scent of night air. Every step rang with the weight of dread and the flicker of hope. The officials, roused by news of his haste, followed at a distance. They wore the smug faces of men certain of their triumph. Their whispers traveled along the marble halls like smoke curling toward fire. "It is done." His prayers betrayed him. The lions have silenced him. They followed not to mourn, but to gloat, ready to see the proof of their envy satisfied. But the king's heart beat with another rhythm. He did not rush to confirm death. He rushed to test hope. His lips moved in words almost like prayer. "O God of Daniel, let it not be so. Let him live." The path to the den felt longer than it had the night before. Every corner turned seemed to delay him, every gate pass seemed too slow. The ground echoed beneath his sandals. Dust lifted at his hurried stride. Servants, guards, and courtiers alike struggled to keep pace. The urgency of one heart pulled the weight of an empire behind it. At last, The den came into view. The stone was still in place, the seals unbroken. The torches from the night had burned to stubs, leaving only faint trails of smoke. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of earth and beasts. The silence pressed. The king approached the stone, his hands trembling, his face pale with hope and fear mingled. He leaned close, his voice breaking the hush with words filled not with authority, but with pleading. "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?" His voice echoed against the stone, against the air above, against the silence within. He waited, breath caught, body trembling. Around him, officials smirked, certain of what the silence meant. Guards stood still, their eyes darting between the king and the stone. A heartbeat. Then another. The silence stretched until it felt unbearable. This is the moment between night and morning. The moment when hope leans over the edge of despair, waiting to see if wings will lift or if the fall will complete. The king bent closer. His lips quivered. His ears strained. His heart prayed in words he could not form. And from the darkness came the sound. A voice, steady, calm, alive. "O King, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him. Nor have I done any wrong before you, O King." The officials froze. The guards gasped. The king's face transformed, sorrow collapsing into joy, fear dissolving into relief. His knees weakened beneath him, his hands lifted to heaven. Tears filled his eyes, spilling freely. He shouted orders with new strength. "Roll the stone away. Bring him out. Quickly." Men rushed forward. Ropes were lowered. The stone groaned as it was pulled aside. Dust rose into the morning air as the opening widened. And from the darkness, Daniel emerged. His body bore no wound. His skin bore no scratch. His eyes shone with calm. His steps were steady, as though he had simply risen from sleep. The lions remained within, silent and subdued, their eyes lowered as though in reverence. The king rushed forward, taking Daniel's hands. "You are alive. Your God has delivered you." His voice cracked with awe, with gratitude, with the weight of a night's fear lifted in a moment. The officials, who had smirked, now paled. Their whispers dried on their lips. Their envy turned to dread. For the God of Daniel had proven himself greater than their schemes, greater than their laws, greater than their lions. The morning rush had ended not in death, but in testimony. And all who stood there knew that they had witnessed more than survival. They had witnessed the living God. Morning light touched the stone as it shifted from its resting place. Dust lifted in a pale veil, curling upward like incense as ropes creaked and hands strained. At the edge, a king leaned forward, heart pulled taut as a bowstring. Officials froze with their false smiles half-formed, surprise cracking them into stillness. Guards braced themselves, half for wonder, half for sorrow. And then, from the darkness that had swallowed a faithful servant, a voice rose, calm, whole, alive. "O King, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him. Nor have I done any wrong before you, O King." The words rang through the morning air like bells after a long night. Clear, simple, unadorned by flourish or fear. They carried a quiet steadiness that could only be learned in the presence of the one who keeps watch when the world cannot. Daniel stood in the mouth of the den as the ropes were lowered again. Hands reached down, sure and urgent. He placed his weight upon the cord and rose toward the light. Stones scraped, ropes strained, hearts held their breath. And then he stood upon the earth again, solid ground beneath feet that had rested upon the floor of a miracle. The king moved first, steps breaking protocol, crown forgotten, dignity secondary to gratitude. He reached for Daniel's hands and found them warm, steady, unshaken. He searched the man's face for fear and found peace instead. Then his eyes scanned for wounds, scratches, torn cloth, any mark at all, and found none. Not a claw's kiss, not a tooth's claim, not even a hem disturbed. It was as if the night had been a long conversation with mercy rather than a struggle with death. Around them, the circle held its silence. Officials swallowed hard. Guards exchanged glances that said everything the tongue could not. Servants peered from the edge of courage and found themselves on holy ground. For the courtyard, for a fragile moment, was more chapel than court. Daniel's reply lived not only in words. It lived in posture, in the unhurried breath, in the way he lifted his gaze first to heaven before the eyes of men. It lived in the humble steadiness of a life that had been answering the same question for years: where does trust rest? And had always given the same answer. He did not speak of himself. He spoke of God. He did not recite accomplishments. He announced faithfulness. He did not explain the chemistry of miracle. He honored the presence that needs no explanation. The king's face changed as the words sank in. Overnight sorrow drained away, replaced by a light that did not belong to marble or sun. It was the glow of a heart unburdened. He had witnessed the boundary where his own power ceased and the power of the living God began. It humbled him. It freed him. It made him smaller in the right way and larger in the only way that matters. Daniel looked upon Darius with the gentleness of one who had prayed for this moment long before lions were ever mentioned. Mercy rested upon his features the way dawn rests upon the horizon, inevitable, soft, sure. He carried no bitterness, held no accusation in his hands. The night had not taught him to resent, it had taught him to remember. He remembered exile and the long discipline of trust. He remembered windows open toward Jerusalem when it would have been easier to shutter them and hide. He remembered the decree and the choice that was no choice at all, because his heart had long ago chosen the path on which it would walk. He remembered the first breath within the den when the world expected panic and found instead the strength of a presence that quiets the instincts of beasts and men alike. This remembrance shaped the way he answered the world now. Not with argument, not with outrage, but with testimony. A testimony that did not shout, for it had already been shouted by the silence of sleeping lions. The king drew himself upright. He ordered the ropes pulled entirely free. He took Daniel by the arm as if to assure his eyes that the man was truly there. Then he turned toward the circle of officials whose seals had once seemed heavy as iron and now felt no weight at all. Their faces were pale, their certainty undone. For a miracle, gentle as a whisper and devastating as a storm to pride, had stood before them and answered every unasked question. Daniel's reply continued, though his lips moved no more. It continued in the way he bowed his head for a moment of quiet, letting gratitude seal the long night with one more prayer. It continued in the way he stood without trembling, proving that peace had soaked him through to the bone. It continued in the way he looked upon his accusers without the hardness that schemes often breed in the hearts they injure. The den had not turned him to stone. It had turned him to light. He looked to the king again. There was no triumph in his eyes, only the assurance of a man whose life is carried, not performed. The words of the night still hovered between them like a bridge they both could cross. My God sent his angel. He shut the mouths of the lions. There is a kind of answer that ends arguments and leaves only worship. It is the answer given when dawn cracks a sealed stone and breath carries from a place where breath should not be. It is the answer that reshapes a ruler, reinscribes a law, reorders a court. It is the answer that needs no applause because the truth itself is a standing ovation. The courtyard breathed again. Birds landed upon parapets they had once avoided when clamor ruled the morning. The light climbed higher, gilding the edges of helmets and the folds of robes. A faint breeze threaded through banners and set them to a quiet speech of their own. Even the tools of the night's decree, the wax, the cord, the stone, seemed chastened by the ease with which God had walked through them. Daniel's reply became a blessing for those who could hear it. For servants who had doubted their prayers mattered in the shadow of palaces. For guards who had learned to obey orders even when hearts protested. For a king who had discovered that regret can become reverence when mercy meets it at the door of dawn. He stepped aside, allowing those charged with the king's safety to gather themselves, to verify seals, to look within and see a den reordered by peace. Some stole a glance at the lion's eyes, half expecting rage returned with the light. Instead they found the same quiet that had held the night, as if a memory remained in the beasts of hands they had not seen but could not disobey. Daniel's reply also stretched back into the night, answering the unspoken worries of those who love God and wonder what obedience will cost them. It answered with this: obedience may cost you a den, but not your keeper. It may cost you the favor of men, but not the favor of God. It may lead you to the edge of fear, but it will also lead you to the center of peace. He could have spoken many things, of plots and papers, of jealousies and judgments, of ropes and rough hands. He could have catalogued every injustice. Instead, he catalogued mercy. He let deliverance be the only argument, and in doing so he taught a lesson palaces rarely teach, that the most persuasive life is the one that rests in God when rest seems impossible. The king issued commands, urgent, swift. The stone was drawn further back. The opening cleared. The court rearranged itself around a new center of gravity. People had come expecting a funeral. They remained to attend a revelation. Even the ground seemed to lean toward the place where God had made himself known. Daniel remained unhurried. He stood as if time had slowed to let thanksgiving have its say. He did not cling to the king, nor recoil from the crowd. He took up his ordinary place in an extraordinary moment. A habit with him, the way rivers take their banks precisely because the sea has taught them where to go. He breathed in the cool of morning and let it remind him of the breath that had kept him company in the dark. He breathed out and let it carry the last fragments of the night's weight away like chaff on a threshing floor made of light. He turned his face, for a heartbeat, in the direction of a land his feet had not walked in many years but his prayers had never left. It was enough. When the king at last found words again, they were not commands to Daniel. They were acknowledgments to heaven. The man whose seal had promised death now bore witness to the God who had promised life. But that proclamation belongs to the next turning of the story. For now, it is enough to see how one simple answer, calm, humble, unafraid, can steady a kingdom. The morning had opened its palms to receive a miracle, and Daniel's reply rested there like a seed. From it would grow decrees that honored the living God. From it would grow justice that unmasked the jealous and unraveled their nets. From it would grow courage in the hearts of those who watched, a courage that would outlive the day. As the courtyard slowly resumed breath, Daniel offered one more answer no ear could hear. A quiet consent to keep living in faith the same way he had lived unto the den. Windows open toward the true home. Prayers steady as heartbeat. Integrity stitched into each hour like thread no blade can cut. There is a way a servant stands after deliverance. It is not with chest thrust forward or chin raised high. It is with shoulders at rest and eyes that know where help comes from. It is with hands ready again for ordinary faithfulness, for the small obediences that build altars out of days. The officials shifted at the edges of the circle. The story would soon turn toward them. But Daniel wasted no breath upon their fear. He left that to justice, in the hands of the God whose mercy had already taught teeth how to keep peace. Let the moment linger. Light on stone. Breath on morning. A king learning the language of reverence. A court seeing that truth stands without needing introduction. A servant whose reply was the echo of 1,000 quiet prayers. And here again the words that answered the night, "My God sent his angel. He shut the mouths of the lions." The tale of danger had become a testimony of nearness. The den had become a sanctuary. The man had become a signpost. And the reply, simple as water, deep as a well, was enough to carry peace across the threshold of a kingdom's day. In the hush that follows wonder, the heart understands what the mind can never own by argument alone. Trust speaks, and the world listens. The faithful answer, and fear forgets its lines. The mouth of morning opens, and hope answers from the dark with a voice still warm from the breath of God. The morning air carried a hush as the king's command echoed across the courtyard. Bring him up. Pull him from the pit at once. Guards, startled yet eager, hurried forward. Their hands found the thick ropes, their voices calling to one another as they lowered them down. The stone was dragged further aside, the opening widened, and the eyes of all fixed upon the mouth of the den. Daniel, steady as the dawn itself, grasped the rope. His fingers curled around the rough cord. His body, though weary from a night on the earthen floor, bore no sign of fear. He set his weight upon the rope, his steps sure, and slowly he was lifted toward the light. Picture the scene. The rope creaks under the pull of many hands. Dust showers downward from the stone lip. A shaft of sunlight pierces into the darkness, falling upon Daniel's face. His features calm, his eyes lifted heavenward, his expression serene. He rises as though drawn not only by rope, but by grace itself. The lions remain below, subdued and silent. Their eyes follow but do not strike. Their muscles rest though strength coils within them. They do not roar, they do not lunge. They only lie as if commanded by a presence they cannot resist. Their peace is the final testimony of the night. Higher and higher Daniel is drawn, until at last his feet touch solid ground again. The crowd breathes as one, a sound like wind through trees. Relief, awe, astonishment, all mingled together. Some fall silent, others gasp, a few whisper prayers they had long neglected. All eyes see the truth, he is untouched. The king himself steps forward. He grasps Daniel's arms, pulling him fully onto the earth. His eyes search for wounds. His hands brush aside the folds of the exile's garments, looking for tears, for scratches, for blood. He finds none. No scar, no mark, no harm. Only the peace of a man kept by God. And the king marvels. No wound was found on him, because he trusted in his God. The words become more than observation, they become proclamation. Spoken for all to hear, spoken against the whispers of officials, spoken into the history of an empire. The officials shift uneasily. Their triumph has turned to dread. Their schemes, once bold, now crumble before the sight of one lifted from the pit alive. They avert their eyes, for they cannot look too long upon deliverance. It unmasks them too deeply. But Daniel's gaze does not linger on them. He turns instead toward heaven. His lips move in thanks, his heart overflowing with quiet praise. He does not gloat. He does not accuse. He does not argue. His very life, standing whole and unbroken before them, is the only argument needed. This moment becomes more than rescue. It is revelation. The ropes pulling him upward are symbols of what trust always does. It lifts, it steadies, it draws the faithful out of shadows into light. The pit that was meant for death becomes a stage for testimony. The den meant for fear becomes a sanctuary of peace. And so Daniel stands again in the light of morning. His life preserved, his faith vindicated, his trust honored. And the story that began with jealousy and deceit now unfolds into justice and proclamation. Tonight, as you rest, let this image settle into your soul. You too are lifted from pits. Pits of fear, pits of worry, pits of regret. And though the ropes may creak, though the pull may feel slow, though the climb may take time, the shepherd does not leave you in the dark. He raises you into light, whole, untouched by what threatened to undo you. Breathe deeply into this truth. Inhale, God lifts me. Exhale, I am safe in Him. With every breath, let yourself feel the strength of unseen hands pulling you upward, steady and sure. Daniel was pulled from the pit. Not by the strength of ropes, not by the mercy of kings, but by the faithfulness of the living God. And that truth would soon turn the court, the kingdom, and the very decree that once condemned him. The courtyard still rang with wonder. Daniel had been lifted from the den, whole, unmarked, alive. The lions lay silent behind the stone, their power stilled by a hand greater than iron bars. The king's joy spilled into words of awe. But at the edges of the circle, the officials who had schemed trembled. Their faces, once proud, now drained of color. Their voices, once eager with accusation, now strangled by fear. Darius turned toward them. His eyes, heavy with regret through the long night, now burned with righteous fire. He had seen their trap, recognized their deceit, and endured their insistence that the law could not be undone. They had twisted loyalty into betrayal, cloaked envy in the robes of justice. And now their guilt stood naked in the light of morning. "Bring them," the king commanded. His voice carried not the weariness of night, but the strength of a ruler awakened to truth. Guards stepped forward, their armor clinking as they seized the officials. The whispers of protest that rose from their lips fell flat against the weight of justice. For no defense could stand against the testimony of a den-turned sanctuary. One by one, the plotters were brought forward. They looked upon Daniel, and their eyes faltered. They looked upon the king, and their voices stuttered. They looked toward the sealed den, and dread knotted their throats. For they knew what awaited them. The pit they had prepared for another now stood ready for themselves. And the king declared it. "Take them. Cast them into the den of lions. They and their households. For they conspired against the innocent, and their malice has returned upon their own heads." The crowd stirred. Some gasped, some nodded in solemn agreement, some shuddered at the swiftness of the turn. The officials who had strutted with confidence now stumbled as guards pushed them toward the place they had chosen for another. Their steps dragged, their faces pale. The stone was moved again. The air that rose carried the musk of beasts now stirred from their supernatural calm. For the angel who had held them still no longer stood in their path. The moment of miracle had ended with Daniel's deliverance. Justice required no further restraint. The officials were cast down into the darkness. Their cries echoed against the stone. The lions, who had lain subdued through the night, now moved with sudden power. Their jaws opened, their paws struck, their roars thundered. And in moments, the pit that had become sanctuary was restored to what it had always been, a place of death for those condemned. The sound shook the courtyard. It silenced every whisper, every doubt, every lingering smirk upon the lips of those who had envied Daniel. Justice had spoken. Swift, terrible, undeniable. Daniel stood apart, his face calm. He did not gloat, did not rejoice in their fall. His trust had always rested in God, not in revenge. And even as justice fell upon the plotters, his heart remained steady in the shepherd's care. The lesson pressed upon every watching soul. Those who dig pits for the faithful often fall into them themselves. Those who weave nets of deceit are often caught in their own threads. Those who envy the light cannot dim it. They only expose their own darkness. Tonight, as you rest, let this truth settle into your heart. You need not fight for vengeance. You need not grasp for justice with your own hands. The God who delivers also defends. He sees the schemes of the envious, the whispers of the deceitful, the traps of the proud. And in his time, he answers. Breathe into this assurance. Inhale, God defends. Exhale, I can rest. Let your heart release the weight of battles you were never meant to fight. Let your soul be still in the knowledge that justice belongs to the one who sees perfectly, who judges righteously, who protects faithfully. The cries of the plotters faded into silence. The roars of lions settled back into the rhythm of beasts satisfied. The stone was rolled again across the opening. And the courtyard stood in awe. For they had seen both mercy and justice, both deliverance and judgment, both the tenderness of God's protection and the severity of his truth. And Daniel, still untouched, stood as a living witness. The God who shut the mouths of lions had opened the eyes of a king and closed the mouths of liars. And the kingdom itself would never forget what had been shown that day. The plotters had fallen into their own snare. Daniel had been lifted from the pit. And the king, humbled by both mercy and justice, prepared to proclaim the truth that had been revealed. The courtyard was still trembling with the echo of lions' roars. Dust had not yet settled from the stone rolled once more across the mouth of the den. The air was thick with the memory of justice, swift, sobering, complete. But amidst that gravity, another sound rose. The strong, clear voice of King Darius. He stepped forward, his robes gathered around him, his crown tilted as though forgotten in haste. His face was wet with the residue of a night's sorrow and a morning's astonishment. His eyes turned first to Daniel, the faithful servant who stood alive and unmarked. Then his gaze lifted higher, beyond palace walls, beyond stone carvings, beyond even the reach of Babylon's towers. He looked toward heaven. And his voice became decree. Peace be multiplied unto you. His words carried across the courtyard, out into the streets, through the gates, into the city itself. Messengers would soon carry them further still, across provinces, across lands where other tongues were spoken. For this was not a whisper for a court, it was a proclamation for a kingdom. I issue a decree, the king declared, that in every dominion of my kingdom men must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall have no end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. The officials who had survived the night shivered at the sound. Their schemes had been undone, their power exposed as fragile, their pride shattered by the roar of truth. The guards bowed their heads, their eyes wide, their hearts burning with the knowledge that they had witnessed the hand of a God stronger than empires. The servants who had peered from shadowed corners now whispered prayers of awe, their faith quickened, their hope renewed. And Daniel stood quietly, not drawing attention to himself, not basking in glory. For the proclamation was not his to claim. It belonged to the God he served. His life had been the canvas, but the brush had always been divine. The king's decree rolled outward like waves from a stone dropped into still water. Every province would hear it. Every village, every palace, every field. From mountain tribes to desert caravans, from riverside farmers to soldiers in distant outposts. All would learn that the God of Daniel had shown himself alive. This proclamation was more than royal law. It was confession. Confession of a man who had known regret, who had faced the limits of his own power, who had seen firsthand the deliverance of God. It was the public undoing of pride, the acknowledgement that the throne of heaven sits above every throne of men. For Babylon had many gods, carved in wood, shaped in stone, gilded in gold. But none had stilled lions. None had silenced envy. None had lifted the faithful from pits sealed by law. Only the living God. The proclamation was also invitation. An open door into reverence. The king could not force worship, but he could command respect. And so, by decree, the name of the God of Daniel spread across the empire. And wherever it traveled, hearts were stirred. Some in fear, some in wonder, some in faith. Tonight, as you listen, let these words be proclamation to your own soul. The God who delivered Daniel is the same today. Living, enduring, unshaken by kingdoms, stronger than schemes, faithful in every shadow. Let his reign be the decree over your heart. Breathe into this truth. Inhale, his kingdom endures. Exhale, his dominion has no end. Let each breath draw you deeper into the peace of knowing you belong to a reign unbreakable, a love unstoppable, a presence unshakable. The proclamation resounded through Babylon, spreading across stone streets, through markets and homes, into the quiet corners of exile where the people of Judah lifted their heads in hope. Their God had not forgotten them. Even in foreign lands, his name was being honored. Even in palaces of idols, his power was declared. And Daniel, the servant who had prayed 3 times a day with windows open toward Jerusalem, now heard the name of his God proclaimed openly by the voice of a king. What was once whispered in exile was now shouted across empires. The king's proclamation marked the turning of the story. Justice had fallen on the plotters. Deliverance had raised the faithful. And now truth was carried by decree to every corner of the realm. A kingdom had been reminded that above all kings reigns the living God. The story has come full circle. What began in exile among the streets of Babylon ends in proclamation that reaches across empires. What began with jealousy whispered in corners ends with the name of the living God spoken aloud by the voice of a king. What began with a sealed stone ends with testimony written upon every heart that witnessed it. Daniel's journey through the lion's den is not only a tale of deliverance. It is a song of trust, a hymn of faithfulness, a lullaby of protection that continues to echo through the ages. Think again of the quiet choices that shaped it. A man who prayed 3 times a day, not loudly, not for show, but steadily. Windows open toward Jerusalem, heart open toward God. It was that daily rhythm, that unshaken trust, that carried him when decrees were signed and laws twisted against him. It was the habit of faith that led him calmly to the den. And it was the presence of God that kept him safe within it. The lions roared, but they did not devour. The officials plotted, but they did not prevail. The king regretted, but his sorrow turned to awe. And in the end, the living God revealed himself, not only to Daniel, but to all who watched. This is what the story whispers into our hearts tonight. Trust is not wasted. Faith is not forgotten. Prayers are not unheard. Even when shadows gather, even when decrees are signed, even when dens await, the shepherd is near. His angels guard. His presence surrounds. His peace transforms fear into stillness. Perhaps you feel surrounded by lions of your own. Fears that press in at the edges of thought. Burdens that pace restlessly in the corners of your mind. Voices of worry that roar louder in the silence of night. Remember Daniel's story. The lions may circle, but they cannot touch what God protects. The pit may surround, but it becomes sanctuary when His presence fills it. The stone may seal, but it cannot close out His mercy. Let yourself rest in that truth now. Inhale, the Lord is my keeper. Exhale, I am safe in Him. With every breath, let the story settle deeper. Let trust replace fear. Let peace replace worry. Let sleep come gently as a gift. Picture the den once more. But now see it empty. Daniel has been lifted out. The lions lie quiet in the dark, their power no longer a threat. The stone is rolled back into place, but it holds no fear, only memory of the night when heaven walked among beasts. The courtyard above is filled with light, the king's proclamation still ringing in the air. And Daniel, faithful servant, walks forward in peace. This is the ending we are given. not of despair, but of hope, not of death, but of life, not of fear, but of trust. For the God who shut the mouths of lions still reigns, still protects, still guards those who trust in him. And so the night closes not with growls, but with calm, not with dread, but with peace, not with exile, but with home in the presence of the living God. Now let your eyes grow heavy. Let your body sink into stillness. Let the story wrap around you like a blanket of quiet strength. You are not alone. You are watched, you are kept, you are loved. The same God who held Daniel in the den holds you through this night. Sleep in his protection. Rest in his peace. And awaken with the dawn to find, once more, that the God of Daniel is your God too. Living, faithful, and near forever.